Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. I can see a number of attendees. My name is Angus Pryor and we'll get going in just a sec. Would you mind, we're just testing the technology. Could you type into the chat, maybe could you type in where you're located, the city or town or state? It's always fun. I want to make sure you can hear me, and secondly, it's always fun to see where people are. Just type that into the chat. Okay. That's coming through now. Sydney, Melbourne. That's good. Let's see where everybody else is. I am usually in Victoria. Okay. Just for everyone that's here joining, just type into the chat where you're tuning in from. You can say the city, you can tell me the part of town if you're in a big city if you want. Always good to find that. We'll get going in just a second. I'm usually based in Victoria. Hello from Bundaberg. That's great. We were in Queensland last week. I'm usually based in Victoria. I moved there to look after my elderly parents, but I spent the last 10 years living in Sydney. I was born in Brisbane, lived in Adelaide for 6 years, did most of my schooling in Canberra, so I can probably identify with most of you, except WA. I've never lived in WA. All right, let me just, one more request, just type in where you're tuning in from. That will help me, and then we'll get going in just a sec. I will be asking you to get on the chat a bit. It just helps me to Bendigo, there we are. Well, we're going to be in Bendigo maybe next month. So make sure that you register for, we've got an event which I'll tell you about. All right, I'm suggesting we get going. Hi, everyone. My name's Angus Pryor and welcome to this topic, maybe a little provocative. Most practices are stuck and here's why. My job, of course, is not just to tell you why you're stuck, but also what you can do to avoid being stuck. So hopefully I press this button and we go on to the next slide. That's great. All right, so the purpose of this session is to unpack changes in dentistry. There are some big changes in dentistry which is causing practice to get stuck. The second thing is to identify some simple changes that you can make today. And then finally, to give you a roadmap for growing your practice by 10% in the next 6 months. Even though there's some changes that are not helping you, growth is definitely possible. A very, very simple agenda today, which is I'm going to give you a little bit of background about me. I'm going to ask you some questions about you so I can adjust my presentation. I'm going to introduce you to the star of this presentation, someone called Ash, and then I'm going to talk to you about getting unstuck. But just so I help people to play along, I'm going to ask you, pardon me, to type into the chat, take action now. Would you do that for me, please? Take action now. Just type that into the chat. The reason I'm getting you to do that, thank you, Jacob. You've got the speedy fingers. It looks like Kaz, is that right? Yeah, okay, that's good. Is because we need to train our brains, thanks, Linda. We need to train our brains to go, what can I implement as a result of this? Like, I'm not here just to entertain you. I want to show you some things that you can implement. People say knowledge is power. We've got another one coming in. That's great. Rafa, maybe. People say knowledge is power, and I'm going, no, it's not. It's not. It's applied knowledge that's power. Welcome, May from Melbourne. Okie dokie. So thank you. Now that I've got your fingers on the keyboard, I wonder if I could trouble you to type into the chat a number. If you're a practice principal, put a 1. If you're an associate, put a 2. If you're a practice manager, put a 3. If you're other, put a 4. Maybe you're Jacob's a 4. Are you on reception, Jacob, maybe? Kaz is a 3. That's practice manager. Rafar is an owner. Reception. Good on you, Jacob. You're doing a great job, I'm sure. Just for everybody else, just type into the chat what your role is. It just helps me to make sure I'm speaking to the right people. May is an owner as well, and Rafar's practice manager, but also number 1. Okay, that's tricky. All right, let's keep going. And then one other question, if you don't mind, because it'll help me to adjust my presentation, is how many chairs are in your practice? Not rooms that are plumbed, but actual chairs. That's good. It's not a competition, just helps me. Okay, great. All right. So it looks like almost everybody's got 2 or 3 chairs. Somebody's got 1. That's great. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. So look, a little bit about me. I've been working with dentists for about 15 years now with my business called Dental Growth Solutions. Started as a marketing agency. We're now much more focused on overall practice growth. A few years ago, I launched a brand called Dental Stars, which provides virtual assistants for dental practice. And the truth is, our expertise has been filling the books at your practice. And I'm pretty sure this is part of the Full Chairs webinar series with our lovely hosts, Centaur, Dental for Web, Dental for Windows. And, you know, we're multi-award winning. We've been very successful, one of the most awarded agencies around. So that's a bit about me. That's a bit about you. Let's talk about Ash. Now you're thinking, who the heck is Ash? This is Dr. Ash. And you're wondering, well, who is Dr. Ash? And Dr. Ash is the star of my new book. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to give you a chance to get a free copy of the book if you'd like. But the way that I've written the book is it's what's called a business fable. So it's actually just a story about this guy, Dr. Ash, but there are some business lessons in there. But the whole thing just reads like a story. If you want to, you know, you want to read a story to your kids at bedtime, you could actually use this book for that. And the last chapter is business principles. So let's learn about Dr. Ash. He's an excellent clinician. I know we've got a few dentists on the call. Patients love him, which is good. His team respects him. He's up to date with his CPD and he flosses regularly. Wow, what a legend. Good old Dr. Ash. So why isn't Ash enjoying practice ownership? Now, for the dentists in the room, you don't have to type this into the chat, but I just want to pose a question to you that I've posed to a number of live audiences recently, which is, you know, I asked the dentist, I was like, how many of you got into dentistry to become a business owner? And generally speaking, most people go, nope, that's not what I got into it for. So Ash is not enjoying practice ownership. Now, Ash's motto has always been, I got this. He's even got the t-shirt, good old Ash. Who of you would you mind putting a Y or an N into the chat? Do you identify with that? Are you a kind of a I got this sort of person, or like that's not really you? Would you mind just put a Y or an N into the chat? Are you an I got this kind of person, or not really you? I don't mind either way. Come on, stick a Y or an N into the chat, please. Maybe we've got a bit of a delay. You guys have been so great at typing in quickly. I got this. Yes or no? Is that your personal ethos? Okay, I'm just not really getting any chat coming through, which is a bit weird. Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to assume, Canella, everything's fine, and I'm going to keep going. Just everyone's been so active on the chat, and suddenly it's dried up. Not sure what that's about. Anyway, let's keep going. And so for someone in business, you know, like being the kind of I got this can work for a while. And as you can see in the image here, there are lots of different ways that areas that business owners might be spending their time, which maybe is not their strength. And I would say increasingly dental practices actually get help with these different things. But I will admit to you that I had an appointment with a dentist client some time back, and he was a bit late for his appointment, and he said, hey, sorry I was late, I was fiddling with the server. And I just want to contrast this for you, especially for the dentists on the call. So this particular dentist was doing all on 4, all on X, as they sometimes call it. And we worked out that his hourly rate for that was about $2,000 or $3,000 an hour. And he was a dentist who was kind of wasting his time doing IT stuff when I'd be like, come on, from a business building point of view, I want you doing as many of this all on X as possible, not fiddling with the server. And of course, perhaps part of the answer is to get on to D for web, dental for web, because then you don't have to worry about having a server anyway. So good old Ash, like life's going well, but then something happened. And what I've got here on the left is a representation of the number of practicing dentists in Australia. That was in 2013. And this is a representation of the number of practicing dentists in 2026. And I can tell you in Australia, an extra 10,000 dentists are practicing compared to 2013. This is based on Dental Board data. And so for poor old Ash, he's got his practice on the left there, and then a new practice opens up, Mighty Dental. Now look, I just want to check that this chat is working. I think we've got to type in boo for Mighty Dental. Would you mind doing that for me? I just want to make sure that chat's working. Because every time I mention, okay, it's good, all right, Canella says good. Type in boo to the chat every time I do Mighty Dental. It's kind of this new practice. And so one of the challenges for Ash, and this is true for some of you at your practice perhaps, is that when you opened the practice, all you really needed to do was just kind of put out your welcome mat. If I've got any owners who've been practicing in dentistry for some time, I mean, depending on where you are, and we have some people in, Sydney, Melbourne, the big cities, and some people more regional, you didn't really need to do anything else. It was pretty much just set up the practice, put out your welcome mat. If you were going to do any advertising at all, you might put an ad in the yellow pages. And that's what it was like when Ash set up his practice. And so when Mighty Dental got set up, boo, yeah, well done, Jacob, just B-O-O, boo, boo hiss. Ash's approach was our patients will stay. We've always done well. It'll be okay. Good old Ash. We like him to stay optimistic. And indeed, in business, you do need to stay optimistic. But I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, hope is not a business strategy. And against the backdrop of an extra 10,000 practicing dentists in Australia, and that number just goes up every year, the number of practicing dentists is growing about 2 to 2.5 times faster in Australia than the population is growing. And so I just need to say it again, like, hope is not a business strategy. And so for Ash, like, things are not okay because this new practice opening up nearby has had a significant impact, but he remains optimistic. Ash has read one of the best regarded business books around. It's called Good to Great. And one of the principles in that book is you confront the brutal facts, but you maintain optimism. So he keeps his optimism. And he goes, I know, I'll go do a few more courses to improve my clinical dentistry. Now, I know a lot of dentists. I've got a lot of friends who are dentists, and I would say that kind of approach is reasonably common. If I've got a problem, well, I'll go and do a few more courses to improve my clinical dentistry. But unfortunately, at Ash's practice, that didn't help much. Okay, so Ash is, he's got this horrible Mighty Dental that's open up nearby, and he's feeling the pinch at his practice. He's a bit unhappy with what's going on, and he thought, let me go and do a course, but it didn't help much. And then Ash, good old optimistic Ash, he thinks, I know, I'll just work harder. That'll be the solution. That'll get me out of this rut. But unfortunately for Ash, it's like, no patience, so I'm not really helping. But the staring room looks great. You can imagine he's working harder and he spent all his time polishing the practice, etc. But unfortunately, that hasn't made a difference for him. Now, the key here is Ash thought that he had a competition problem with Mighty Dental. First person to type in boo, I'll send you a scratchy through the post. Let's see who's going to be first. Oh, well done, Jacob. Afterwards, when you're putting notes into the chat, you can select so that only the organisers can see. And if you give me your address, then I will post you a scratchy through the post. Who knows? Maybe you win $10,000. You see, Ash thought that he had a competition problem, but Ash has a business problem, and I want to make it really clear. These are not the same things. Competition, all of us are facing more competition. I'm facing more competition in my business, but for Ash, he's got a business problem. And see, for Ash as a dentist, and I know there are a number of dentists on this call, like you've always been able to rely on your clinical skills. And in an environment where there's not a lot of competition, that's totally fine. But what Ash is realizing is that, in fact, what he's got to go a bit deeper on is his business skills. Okay, so this is very common. Dentists, all of your training has been about improving your clinical skills. But in fact, the thing that we've got to be embracing here, that Ash has got to be embracing, is business skills. Because here's a really critical message. Clinical skills does not equal business skills. Now, I'm going to show you some evidence of this. Some of you are, maybe you think that's an accurate statement. Some of you, maybe you think that's not accurate. But I'm going to tell you, in my experience, clinical skills does definitely not equal business skills. I've been in business for about 15 years. Some people call it the best personal development course you've ever done, because believe me, it'll challenge you. And the reason for this, of course, if you're a dentist or maybe you're a hygienist or an OHT, is that when you go and do your studies, your university studies, there's no training on strategy or leadership or marketing or finance or growth or HR or recruitment or, you know, whatever else of these other things that you need to be doing. All right, another chance to for a bit of crowd participation. So on the left, we have dentist A brilliant technical dentist, okay? They're a bit quiet. The phone does go unanswered a bit. The team is a bit disorganized, and patients will usually wait 25 minutes to go into their appointment on average. So that's dentist A. Let's talk about dentist B. So dentist B, they're a good clinician. So dentist A, brilliant technically. Dentist B is a good clinician. They're friendly, they've got great systems, great communication, and a confident team. So I've got a very simple question for you. Just type into the chat, which dentist's business do you think grows faster? Dentist A or dentist B? Thanks, Kaz. Thanks, Jacob. All right, it's interesting. Maybe, I don't know what it was. It just that there was a bit of a, all right, the consensus is B. So I've just said, good clinical skills does not equal good business skills. And as you can see, dentist A is technically a better clinician than dentist B. But it's all of these other things that make the difference. Now, this one I don't want you to type into the chat, but I'm going to ask you to consider this. Have you ever seen a patient from, we'll call it a quote unquote better practice than yours, bit bigger, growing faster, shinier, whatever it is, and then you look in the patient's mouth and you're thinking, oh, I'd always assumed these guys were somehow better than us, and then you look in the patient's mouth and you go, what the heck? What kind of dentistry is going on there? I don't need you to answer this one. I don't need you to type that into the chat. I'll just tell you, lots and lots of dentists have said this to me, and really this is just more evidence of what I'm talking about, which is that being a great clinician is not a guarantee of having a great business, and having a great business doesn't necessarily mean you're a great clinician. I think most people would identify with that. So for Ash, he goes, I become a better dentist, my practice will grow. And I would have to say to you, there are a lot of dentists who think that. I think because this webinar is about, when practice gets stuck, but it's part of a series with Centaur about full chairs. And so Ash, he doesn't want to be stuck. He wants a full chair. And he thinks, if I become a better dentist, my practice will grow. But I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, being a better dentist doesn't automatically build a better business. The key there is probably automatically. I'm not saying there is zero connection between being a better dentist and a better business. It's just that we've got a few things that are making this more difficult. The main one is that Joe Public can't tell if you're a better dentist or a worse dentist, and I'm going to show you what to do instead. That's the first thing. Look, occasionally you'll get a dentist who's doing something really unusual, and that can help business, but mostly in the eyes of your patients, all dentists are the same. And so unfortunately for Ash, he's stuck, which is the book is called The Stuck Practice. Poor old Ash is stuck in his practice. Now, the other thing I need to tell you is that when you get stuck in practice, there can be other implications. And so for Ash, he's married to the lovely Anita. They've got a child together, and being stuck at work is impacting his family life. Anita starts commenting about the fact that he seems very distant when he's at home. They're not really spending the quality time together. His son's always wanting them to go and play football together, and Ash just keeps on sort of fobbing him off. And he spends the evening sitting on the couch cuddling a tub of ice cream. So the impact of that stuck practice, of course, is not just the practice itself, but it's the impact on family. And the other thing for Ash is the impact of this stuck practice on his health. Now, firstly, as I said, he's these days he's much less active. He used to be quite active, but now he just doesn't feel like it, and I get that. And also, there's a mental health aspect, which is for Ash that increasingly he finds himself sitting in his car in the car park of his own practice, not wanting to go inside. So the implications of being a stuck practice is not just the business, but actually how it can bleed into family and health. Which begs the question, does Ash get unstuck? Remember, he's the star of this, my new book. And if so, how does he get unstuck? And the answer to that is, I'm going to come to that a bit later in the presentation. All right, let's keep going. Now, this one, I do need some participation, please. It's a simple question. If a patient walked into your practice today, what would convince them that they've made the right choice, that you're the right choice for them? Just type a word or two into the chat. If they walk into your practice today, what would convince them that you're the right choice for them? I'm going to have a little drink while you do that. Start chatting with a smile. I like it. Welcome, experience in surgery. Well done, Jacob. You're welcome. And experience in surgery. What else? Someone comes into your practice today, like as consumers, we want to make a good decision, a good choice. What else, you others? Some people are thinking about this. How do they walk in and they go, oh yeah, I've made a good choice. I've chosen the right practice. I can tell you when I did this in front of a live audience last week, that some people spoke about, how friendly everybody was, whether they ran on time, sharing compassion. I like your thinking, Kaz. Understanding the patient's needs. Yeah, absolutely. And the curious thing about this list of things that's coming up here is none of it's clinical dentistry. They think you've made a good choice, but it's not about clinical dentistry. So with that in mind, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking to you about patient experience. And there are 5 areas in which you can influence what the patient experience is for patients coming to your practice before the appointment, when they arrive, in surgery, as they leave, and after the appointment. Let's have a look at these one by one. Now, just before I show you what's on here, just a quick yes or no. Do you offer online booking at your practice? Would you mind putting that into the chat, please? A yes or a no? Okay, looks like everyone who's playing has put a yes in there. I'm aware there's some of you that haven't typed it into the chat yet. Yeah, we've got more attendees than people typing into the chat, but who knows, maybe you're talking to a patient. So it looks like most of you are offering online booking. And I have to tell you, from a business building point of view, do that. If you're not doing it, start. I met someone in a dental practice in Melbourne a few weeks ago, and they said, quote, and I hope you're not on this call, but if you are, I'll restate to you what I said at the time. They said, quote, "We tried it 8 years ago and it didn't work very well, so we haven't tried it again. Get back on the horse." Now, data from Centaur, our host today, suggests that you can expect to see in the order of 5 to 7 additional bookings a month by simply offering that online booking. So definitely do want to offer that. Well, then my question is simply this. When patients book online, do you or someone at the practice call them? Because it's very easy. That's good to see, Kaz. It's very easy for people to be sitting on their phone, in the evening booking in, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to show up. Yeah, that e-form's okay, but I'm going to show you, I think we've got a chance to do more than just these sort of bare basics from a medical point of view. And the other thing that you can do is to pre-welcome your patients. This is about patient experience. And so the things that are at your disposal, look, I like a welcome call. In fact, call them as quickly as you can. Often people are booking in the evening, but first thing the next morning. Now, you can prepare a video or an email, maybe from the practice principal, just telling them what to expect from a patient experience point of view. Maybe you've got to tell them about the parking arrangements, some form of personalization, maybe find out if they're anxious, if they need to bring a support person, like whatever the case may be. Maybe you're offering TV, they can watch TV, and maybe you're saying, would you prefer this style or that style? This is about patient experience, and the research shows the kind of patient experience that you give people will impact their views on your clinical skills, because they can't assess your clinical skills. So they go, oh, no, I go to a really good dentist. I'll just give you an example of this before we move on. When I was living in Sydney until a few years ago, I had an optometrist, I guess she was. She was kind of a bit more qualified than your average optometrist, but she wasn't an ophthalmologist. And I was talking to my wife about her recently, and I said, oh, yeah, she was really good. And I paused for a minute and I thought, how do I know she was good? I mean, I've got no way of knowing whether clinically she was good, bad, or indifferent. But I realized it was those things that we mentioned before. She listened to me and she talked about sort of where things were up to. And it was all of that communication, all of this patient experience stuff that made me believe she was good. All right, next one. When they arrive at your, so we've got a few of you who are sending confirmations, by the way, for your online appointments. Pick up the phone, leave a voicemail. We need that human connection. Now, the next one is around, when they arrive at the practice. And another yes or no, can you please type into the chat if you're doing a morning huddle? So where you get together as a team for 5 minutes. Good, Jacob. Good, Rafa. I don't know whether to call you Rafa or Rafa. Okay, it looks like most of you are. Maybe some of you are not. Maybe the people who are putting in a yes, and the people who are not going to put anything in. This is a chance for you to make the patient feel special. Hey, guys, we've got Angus coming in for the first time today. He's going to be here at 11. Let's make him feel welcome. Some of the practices that we work with, they have a welcome sign on the counter. It can be backlit or a little whiteboard or whatever. It says, welcome to our new patients. And then you write their name on them. And the goal here is to make the patients feel special. As the saying goes, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Even, depending on, most of you have got 2-chair practices. Even like when Angus opens the door Thanks, Rafa. Rafa, I'm not sure. Are you good at tennis? Um, even when the patient opens the door, it's like, if Angus's appointment's at 11 and I don't recognize this guy and he shows up at 5:02 or whatever, it's kind of like, oh, are you Angus? One of the biggest selling books in the personal development space, a real old one called How to Win Friends and Influence People, said that our name is the sweetest sound to our ear. So use your name. All right. Next, we go to in surgery, and you're thinking, patient experience, that's no big deal in surgery. Oh, really? One of the things that my dentist does, one of the benefits of working in the dental industry is that when I moved to go and be a good son and help my elderly parents, I know lots of people in the dental industry, and I was like, who's a good dentist where I live? I'm not going to say who it was. And one of the things that these guys do brilliantly is they pre-frame everything. What do I mean by that? Like literally, while I'm in the surgery, not a word is spoken that they haven't told me is happening. Now, something I need to tell you is, like in nature, do you know what the most vulnerable position is? It's lying on your back, face up. If you ever see two dogs fighting and then a dog sort of gives up, they lie on their back to kind of go, okay, you got me. Well, that is, of course, the physiology of patients in a dental chair. And so your patients are already feeling a bit vulnerable lying down in that situation. And so, as I said, one of the things my dentist does is they'll go, Angus, look, I'm going to use this probe and test, you're going to have a look at your gums and your teeth, and I'm going to call out some numbers and Jenny's going to type it into the computer. And then when we're done, I'm going to tell you what we found. So what I don't hear at all is, hey, Jenny, what did you get up to on the weekend? And hey, are we going to be ready for this appointment at 11:30? Like none of that. You should not be having any of that conversation at all. Try to pre-frame everything, because what it does from a patient experience point of view, I feel like I'm the most important person there. Like, newsflash, for most of you, you've got so much competition. This is, in some ways, it's the only thing you can cling on to have them stick with you. And so this is something so simple to implement. So that's that one. The other thing I'd say is I'm lying on my back. I can't see what you're doing. So tell me what's happening and show me. If you don't have an intraoral camera, like get one, show the pictures. I could tell you stories of the impact it has on treatment planning. A dentist I was seeing in Sydney for a while, he found one of my teeth and there was something that was not great about it. And so he put a photo of it on the screen in front of me, about the size of a soccer ball. Like, it was huge. And we were chatting about something else. And the whole time I can see this tooth. Now, one of the things you need to understand is that for Joe public, they are not used to seeing photos of their teeth zoomed in. There's the saliva and everything, and the tooth was looking ugly as. And the dentist goes, oh, Angus, look, I just want to show you this tooth. This is what we found. We could do something, or we could sort of wait a bit. And I've been looking at this image for about the last 2 or 3 minutes. And I'm like, no. I want to get it fixed right now. I mean, you don't even, I'm not, it's kind of making sales without doing any selling at all. So tell me and show me. And your job in surgery is to make me feel safe. The next step is as the patient leaves. And the first thing I would say to you is give me a compelling reason to come back for the next appointment. So many practices, they don't do this. It's like, okay, well, we'll see you next time, blah, blah, blah. And if people get busy or money's tight or whatever, they go, oh, I don't really need to go back. I hear language like maintenance. And I just have to say to you, like, none of us are excited by maintenance in any part of their lives. Are you excited about car maintenance or health maintenance? Like, of course not. And so what I'd much rather see is, this is something that you can use. Dentists tell me that 80% of your patients have got some form of gingivitis. I think I'd like to give away another scratchy here. Let's play a little game. fingers on the keyboard. What does itis mean? You know, you've heard of conjunctivitis. Well done, Kaz. Inflammation, which is to say around 80% of your patients have got active disease. It's inflammation. We know that's not something we want. Now, you see it all the time, and so for you, it's no big deal, but you can talk to your patients, not fear-mongering, just telling them the truth. Okay, Angus, look, you know, we've done some tidying up, but I do need to tell you we found some gingivitis. There's active disease there. I've managed to fix it up for today. Now, listen to this language closely. But I want to make sure that we see you by no later than, and then give a date, so that we can make sure we stay on top of this active disease. Okay? This is not fear-mongering. This is telling the bleeding truth. Get that little joke there, the bleeding truth? You've got active disease. I need to see you by no later than. And then when the patient goes out into reception, you need to give the same message to the receptionist in front of the patient. Now, look, it's possible to do this discreetly. I was in a practice and the dentist said, look, I sort of squat down next to the receptionist. And I can speak quite quietly to them and say, hey, Mary, look, you know, we found Mrs. Jones. She's got some active disease. We need to make sure we get her booked in by no later than. One of the reasons your patients don't come back is because you don't give them a compelling reason. And the next thing I would say is everybody leaves with their next appointment booked. And a lot of practices don't do this. Now, look, if they're moving overseas or maybe they've just been, you know, visiting from another state or country, well, that's fine. But for everybody else, get them booked in, which means you've got to be training your reception team in negotiation skills. And the key here is make me feel cared for. So that's as they leave. All right, and then finally, after the appointment, particularly for new patients, call them. I know some of you are relying on your, you know, your text messages or emails or whatever, which is okay, but having a human being calling a human being is the most powerful thing. Let's just be clear. Here's my phone. We are more connected now than at any time in human history. I think most of us would agree with that statement. And yet here's the irony. We are craving human connection now more than at any time in human history. So we're very well connected, but we're craving human connection. You know, we've got record levels of anxiety, etc., etc. So getting someone to call them and say, hey, Angus, look, you know, thanks for visiting us yesterday. How is everything? How was the appointment? What was the best part? Is there anything we could have done better for you? Anything else we should know? It's, you know, it's all very cordial. And what happens for most people is they go, oh, it was fine. You know, the doctor was great. You know, the staff were very friendly, blah, blah, blah. No, there's nothing I'd change. Well, that, my friends, is the perfect time to ask for a review. Oh, that's great. You know, could we let other people know about your experience? Would you mind if I sent you a link and you can leave us a lovely review? That's the perfect time to ask for that. But the other thing I'd say is you listen to me and sometimes you're going to need to recover, which is actually, no, it wasn't that good. And this is a chance to uncover the elephant in the room. You know, that who knows? Ironically, the dentist's got bad breath, or someone's got body odor, or you just exclusively played country music the entire time I was there. It drove me crazy, whatever. And for some people to recover, you say, well, why don't I get you booked back in to see Dr. Jones so we can get this sorted? Some cases, they're basically going, no, I'm never coming back, in which case you've got to feed that back to the team and figure out how we sort this. So that's patient experience. Like, this is really important to get right. Remember, patients can't tell what you're like as a clinician, but they make assumptions about your clinical skills based on the patient experience. And so what this dentist is saying, so it's not all about the dentistry. No, in the face of an extra 10,000 dentists practicing in Australia, unfortunately, it's not just about the dentistry anymore. We've got to be embracing this patient experience. And so therefore, what I need to say to you is patients don't just buy dentistry. What they're buying from you is confidence. They want confidence in their smile. They want confidence in you, the clinician. Remember, they've got no way of knowing whether your clinical skills are good, bad, or indifferent. And they glean that based on your team, the kind of experience that you give me. Did you remember that I love cats and playing bingo and, collecting Duran records, or whatever my thing is? That builds confidence in your systems. Now let's go to the chat again. By the way, Kaz, and who was the other one? Jacob, I need you to send me discreetly in the chat an address so I can post you a scratchy through the post. I've got a question for you. Anybody know who is the biggest employer of young people in Australia? Anyone know? Just take a guess. Like every one of you has heard of this business. Who's the biggest employer of young people in Australia? Well done, Kaz. You're sharp as a razor. It's McDonald's. And so you might be thinking, well, why are we talking about McDonald's, Angus, when I've got the word systems on the screen here? You ready? This is my definition of McDonald's. A multi-billion-dollar business run by teenagers. A multi-billion-dollar business run by teenagers. Think about that for a second. Now, my son worked for Macca's. My daughter-in-law worked for them when they were teenagers. And the thing that McDonald's has got going for it, for most of us, is not great food, but it's consistent and reliable. I'm just trying to remember from the beginning, somebody was in Bundaberg, someone was in Sydney, someone was in Bendigo. And the thing that we know about McDonald's is if I go to McDonald's in any of those places, the hamburger is going to be the same. And the way that happens is through systems. And it's that same system that allows each patient at your practice to get a consistent patient experience. Because in service delivery, that's tricky. You could deliver great service and terrible service within 2 minutes of each other. And so the final thing is they want confidence in their own decision. This is the game that we're in. And so for poor old Ash, who's really struggling, as I've said, Ash is stuck. It's actually for people like Ash struggling in this that I wrote the book, The Stuck Practice. And I'll tell you at the end of this how you can get a free copy of it. Just launched last week. All right, well, let's talk about getting unstuck. Now, before we do this, just a little reminder. We're certainly very grateful to Dental for Web for sponsoring this webinar today, and they've got some exciting new things coming up. The first is that they've got a modernised appointment book and significant speed improvements. So that launches next month. And let's face it, everybody likes the sound of those things. The second thing for me as a business guy, I absolutely love this, Pulse Analytics. It's business intelligence analytics, which will mean that it, because sometimes it's quite hard. We're sort of in the micro, but big picture, what are the levers we can pull to help with the practice? And then the third one is kind of a curious one, which is what we call smart attendance predictions. And so it's basically forecasting for these at-risk appointments, because the one thing we know is empty chairs, bad for business. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention, and I know where some of you are, but I don't know where all of you are, is that with my new book, we've got this thing called the Stuck Practice Roadshow, which is a book launch now. So this is a free fun night for the whole dental team. There are drinks, prizes, networking, suppliers, specials, and practical takeaways, and it's one CPD point as well. Now, if you're in Queensland, I'm sorry, we were there last week. You'll notice that all of these spots are regional. The truth is that Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, they're pretty well looked after by the dental industry, ADX and such. But for the regional places, generally speaking, nobody goes there. And so I know Kaz is in Bendigo, so may I suggest you scan that QR code and register yourself, register other team members. We will feed you. There'll be drinks and food and so on. We'll have a bunch of dental suppliers. They've got specials. We found the feedback last week was fantastic. People really enjoyed it. Yes, you get to listen to me present a keynote, talking a bit more about Dr. Ash and what I learned in putting the book together. And it'll be a fun night. Each one of these is held at a car dealership, so it's a beautiful venue. Anyway, so that if you are nearby one of those locations, then scan that QR code, get your free seat, and bring the whole team. It's designed for the whole team. One CPD. All right, let's keep pushing on. So we're going to talk now about getting unstuck. Now, I need to tell you a little story. I've been doing this for a long time, and my background is marketing. I've got a master's degree in business and marketing. And one of the things that I could never quite get my head around is how is it that with two practices, we would be doing exactly the same marketing for them, and yet they'd get different outcomes. And I want to tell you, like, that is not an unusual experience. The truth is that is a reasonably common experience. And what I realized is that as much as that, you know, you can have such different experiences across practices, most practices are already sitting on the next 20% of growth. You may think that's a big statement. I'm telling you, that is my experience. You know, unmined gold, low-hanging fruit that just hasn't been identified with. Now, if your practice is brand new, probably not. But for many of the people on this call, this is absolutely true. And so it's not that you need more ideas. It's just about clarity on what to do next. Now, as a result of more than 10,000 hours of consulting with practices all over Australia, city, country, specialist, non-specialist, big, small, corporate, non-corporate, etc., I've come up with what I call the big six, which is that if we can get these things right in a practice, then growth is inevitable. Attraction, we need to attract those right patients. We need to convert them, you know, convert that interest into an appointment. We've spoken a lot about patient experience in this. This is the middle of 3 webinars on full chairs. Patient communication, follow-up, and then culture and leadership. And it's those things that are real practice growth. You know, they generate the growth. As we've discovered, there's not actually a strong link between having excellent clinical skills and having an excellent practice for most practices. And so I just wanted to show you some of the areas where practices can struggle. Now, this one's talking about conversion and converting those inquiries into appointments. And I'm going to show you some data from Sydney. This was calling literally hundreds of practices on a regular business day during regular hours. But this is one study. I could show you many studies Australia-wide. And what we found was 41% of practices didn't answer their phone. You could have amazing marketing. You could have Justin Bieber write a song about your practice. But if you don't answer the phone, then in many cases, that's the last opportunity you get. What about something like this, which you go, hey, Angus, you know, we're pretty good on the marketing, the attraction. We're pretty good on the conversion, great patient experience, great patient communication, great follow-up. But as you can see from this image, unfortunately, what we're probably looking at here is not great culture and leadership. You know, the leader's all enthusiastic about practice growth, and the body language of the team there says, we're not. And this is my point, like there's a number of things one's got to get right. Now, if you can get these things fixed, then you can see some real change. So this is Dr. Brian Chen. And using, you know, this case, it was focusing on attraction and patient communication. As he said, we worked with him. He'd grown 30% in the last year. Dr. Johan Thomas, this was more around patient attraction and conversion. And as he said, since my company started helping us, we've grown by almost 46% in less than 2 years. And then finally, for Dr. Jeff Hall, it was more around patient communications and follow-up. And as he said, honestly, it's the best money I've ever spent because it's all about the return on investment. I'm just trying to make the point here, like if you're, I'm hoping that you're not stuck, although, you know, you're on this call to learn about that, but this series is about full chairs. And the truth is, for you to get full chairs, it can be different things at different practices. And so what I wanted to talk to you about briefly before we finish up is what we're calling 10 in 6, which is, imagine if you could have a guaranteed 10% income boost in your practice in the next 6 months. Imagine if they could be guaranteed. We've got all this kind of extra competition and, maybe a bit of economic doom and gloom, but what if we could guarantee that income boost in the next 6 months? Which begs the question, if those are the 6 levers that we need to focus on, how do we do that? And so basically working for a combination of very targeted marketing, doing consulting with the practice and providing some offsite help so that nothing falls through the cracks. That's how we're now working with practice to guarantee that growth. Many of you have had the experience where you've maybe worked with a marketing agency and they promised the world, but you haven't noticed the difference. And maybe they did a good job and maybe they didn't. But the challenge is we've got to get all of these areas working together. And in our experience, you can get that marketing right, a bit of consulting, so we're measuring the things that really matter, and we've got some offsite help, so we're not missing those phone calls. We can chase up patients, etc. That's how you can generate that growth. So the way that this program works is, and I just want to be super clear, right now I'm not selling anything except an idea. I'm not going to ask you to buy anything. I just want to explain how this thing works. So for this minimum 10% growth in 6 months, from our point of view, what we're offering is a founding partner program. And there'll be very special pricing for this that we will not offer again. Again, I'm not asking you to buy anything now. But our guarantee is very simple. If we find that you're eligible, we guarantee you a minimum of 10% growth in 6 months. Otherwise, we'll work for free for the next 12 months. And as the owner of this business, I don't like working for free. So we'll be extremely confident if we make the offer. And the reason we're doing this is we're looking for case studies and testimonials, which means if we deliver on what we say, then we're asking to do that with you. And we want this to be a partnership, because if I've learned anything in dentistry, we need to be, sort of rowing in the same direction, as they say. So that's our side. From your side, and this is where you've got to pay attention. Generally, it must be a minimum 2 surgery practice. If it's 3, that's okay, but it must be minimum 2 surgery practice. Now, look, I've said in this example that let's say you're around 1.5 chairs full. I mean, maybe it's 1.3, maybe it's 1.7. What we can't have is a 2 surgery practice where you're only using 1 chair, and we can't have it where you're full, because otherwise, where's the growth going to come? And we need an owner and 1 or more associates who can do more hours. If we grow you, you've got to be able to deliver the dentistry. Hopefully that's pretty obvious. The practice would need to be turning over a minimum of $700,000 a year, and you're looking for a growth partner. You don't like the idea of spending money with no promise of what the result is. You go, no, I like the idea. We work together. We generate a minimum of 10% growth in 6 months. So that's the idea, and the process is very simple. If you go, this sounds interesting, minimum 10% growth in the next 6 months, then all you've got to do is just say, oh, that sounds interesting. We've got limited spots for this founding partner program. As I said, though, we won't be repeating the price again. You express your interest. We'll ask you to do a 10-minute survey, and then we'll get on a Zoom call. That's how it works. And so what I've done there is to put the QR code up. If you think I'm interested in getting guaranteed growth at my practice, at least finding out more, like there's no obligation or anything, then can I suggest scan the QR code, express your interest, and then we'll ask you to do this survey and kind of off we go. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. All right, which begs the question, what about Ash? Did he get unstuck? And if so, how? By the way, I just wanted to check. No, it's fine, no comments. And the answer is, to find out, you've got to read the book, The Stuck Practice. So what I want to do is make an ethical bribe. You ready for an ethical bribe? If you feel that I've added some value today, then what I've got for you there is a QR code, which leads to leaving a review for us. So you could leave us a simple review and say, yes, it's obvious that Angus knows a bit about dentistry, he's provided good insights, whatever you want to say. And then all you've got to do is just message us. That's the email address there, thrive@anguspryor.com. And you just send a note that says, hey, book, please, I left a review. I need to know your name and address so we can send you a copy of the book. Alternatively, if you're more of a listener, then we can send you the audio version. Now, I've just finished recording it in the studio last week, and the audio version will be out in the next week or two. So that's my ethical bribe. If you feel like I provided some value today, then that's the QR code, so you can leave us a review, and then all you got to do is just email us so we know that you've done it and where to send the book. All right, let's summarize. So a bit of background. There's some increasing competition on the dental industry. And what we've learned from meeting Ash is that you cannot rely just on your clinical skills, because clinical skills does not equal business skills. And then finally, if you're like, this is good, Angus, but I wouldn't mind a hand, and frankly, I don't want to just be spending money on the hope that something might happen. I like the sound of getting a guaranteed minimum 10% growth in the next 6 months. Then that was the QR code. But importantly, we just need you to take action now. Now, we've had, thank you so much, Jacob. Jacob, you need to send me your address so I can post you Scratchy, and same for Kaz. So did we achieve this? Unpack changes in dentistry causing practices to get stuck. Hopefully you feel I've done that. To identify simple changes practices can make today. We spoke a lot about patient experience, and then this roadmap for a minimum of 10% growth. Most practices are stuck. Here's why. There's the QR codes for those things. If you're interested in getting a free copy of my book and you're happy to leave us a review, that's on the left. If you'd like to find out more about this minimum 10% growth in 6 months, then scan that one. We've got a few minutes left before we finish up. Let me just see if there's any questions. Otherwise, we'll let you go. Okay, somebody's asked about the next steps for the 10 in 6. If you scan that QR code on the right, you literally go there, and all we ask is kind of, who are you? You know, what's your name, what's your practice name, and what are your contact details? And then we will send you a survey. The survey will take you 10 minutes. We want to make sure you're a good candidate, because I don't want to do this 10 and 6 with any practice that I'm not extremely confident we can deliver the results. So the survey helps us to find that out. Once we've seen your survey results, you get on a Zoom call with me. We'll talk through what the details are, and then you can decide whether you want to go ahead or not. I assure you it's no big pitch. We're looking for founding partners because we want success stories. Any other questions before we finish up? Someone's asked, what happens to Ash? Well, you've got to read the book to find out. I'm not going to tell you the answer. But as I said, if you're happy to leave us a review, then I will send you either a physical copy of the book through the post, or if you're more of an audio book person, I will send you that as well. That one, just be aware, it's going to take a few weeks. It's being edited now. Well, I think we're done. I want to honour your time. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. I hope you got some real value there. And we'll look forward to catching you in about 2 weeks' time for the final in the series of full chairs. Remember, if you want a Scratchy, you've got to send me your address so I can post it to you. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you later.